Hello, English learners, and welcome. I'm your host, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Excited to chat about English learning today. Today, we're diving into something I know is on the minds of many of you, your English accent. You've shared some really interesting audio from an English learning podcast, and our mission, basically, is to pull out the most helpful nuggets, give you a clearer understanding of what an accent actually is, the key differences between accent and, well, clear pronunciation, those common stumbling blocks, and most importantly, practical ways you can boost your confidence when you speak.
Exactly. The material you sent over is fantastic, actually. And what immediately strikes me is its encouraging and, down-to-earth approach. It's not about chasing some impossible accent-free ideal, which is refreshing. It's more about making your English clear and feeling good about how you speak. Think of it like finding your own comfortable and effective voice in English.
Okay, so let's get right to the basics then. The podcast you listen to starts by defining what an accent is, and it's a really fundamental point. It's simply the way you pronounce words based on the first language you learned. But here's something to really think about. Everyone speaks with an accent, whether it's someone from Britain, the United States, Australia, or even different parts of those countries like, say, New York or Texas. Everyone has their own unique way of saying things.
That's such a crucial starting point, isn't it? What's fascinating here is that having an accent is presented as completely normal. It's not a mistake to be fixed, but a natural part of being a multilingual speaker.
Right.
This immediately shifts the focus in a really positive way for learners, wouldn't you agree? It's about adding to who you are, not erasing something.
Absolutely. And this leads us to a really important distinction that the source material emphasizes. The difference between your accent and your pronunciation.
Yeah, that's key.
Pronunciation, it explains, is about how clearly and correctly you say individual words and sounds. You could have a very recognizable accent, but still pronounce words accurately enough that everyone understands what you mean.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, it means that the real goal is effective communication. Your accent is a part of what makes you, you. But clear pronunciation is what ensures your message lands the way you intend it to. You can absolutely have both your own unique sound and English that's easy for others to follow.
Now, the podcast also tackles a really common idea. I think this will be good news for a lot of you. It's the notion that adults can completely lose their native accent.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The accent elimination myth.
Apparently, research suggests that while kids learning a new language can sometimes sound just like a native speaker, adults will almost always keep some influence from their first language.
Yes, exactly. And this raises an important question about where you focus your energy, right? By realizing that completely shedding your accent as an adult is, well, a long shot, you can redirect that energy. Focus on more realistic and impactful goals, like mastering specific sounds or improving your overall clarity. It's about working with the way your voice naturally wants to move in English, not trying to force it into something else entirely. Embrace your linguistic fingerprint. It tells the story of your multilingual journey.
Exactly. So instead of chasing this potentially frustrating dream of totally eliminating your accent, the real focus should be on making your pronunciation as clear as possible so that everyone can easily understand you. That's the real victory.
Precisely. And this brings us nicely to the nitty-gritty, the common pronunciation mistakes that can sometimes get in the way of that clarity.
Right. The podcast you shared really gets into some of the most frequent challenges English learners face. Let's start with that tricky sound. It seems a lot of learners tend to say it like an S or a Z. So think ends up sounding like sink and this like Z's.
This is such a common hurdle. And it's because that this sound, both the unvoiced one in think and the voiced one in this, simply doesn't exist in many other languages. The podcast offers a really clear physical tip, gently placing your tongue between your teeth,
Okay.
and then softly blowing air out as you make the sound. Think of it like a tiny peekaboo with your tongue, just a little tip showing between your teeth. It emphasizes practicing slowly with words like think and this.
It definitely feels a bit strange at first, doesn't it? I can imagine. But as the audio suggests, with a little practice, it becomes more natural. Another area where things can get confusing is with short and long vowel sounds.
Ah, yes.
Words like ship and sheep or bit and beat can sound very similar if the length of the vowel sound isn't really clear.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how a tiny difference in how long you hold a vowel sound can completely change the word. The podcast's advice to really exaggerate those long vowels like sheep, and then contrast them with the quick, short sounds, ship. That's a brilliant way to train both your ear to hear the difference and your mouth to make it. It's like stretching and then quickly snapping a rubber band.
Absolutely. Good analogy. Then we have the R and L sounds, which the source points out can be particularly challenging for learners whose first language doesn't have a strong distinction between them. The example given is accidentally saying rice when you mean lice or light instead of right.
Right. And the key here, and the podcast nails it, is all about where your tongue goes. It's very physical. For the L sound, the tip of your tongue should touch the roof of your mouth just behind your front teeth. L.
Okay.
For the R sound, your tongue pulls back a bit in your mouth and doesn't touch anything. Or the little exercise of saying la 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 for L and R for R might seem simple, but they're really effective for building that muscle memory in your tongue.
Makes sense. And we can't forget those sneaky silent letters. Words like no, honest, and castle have letters that are written but not actually pronounced. That can be so confusing when you're learning just from written English.
Definitely. This really highlights why just reading English isn't enough. You've got to hear it spoken. The podcast rightly points out that the best way to learn these is by listening to native speakers and paying close attention to how words are actually said, not just how they're spelled. It's a good reminder that English spelling and pronunciation, well, they don't always play by the same rules.
True. One more common mistake the source mentions is adding extra vowel sounds at the end of words. Apparently, some learners might say something like work-a instead of just work, or sport-a instead of sport.
The schwa sound creeping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this often comes from patterns in other languages where words frequently end in vowels. The podcast correctly notes that English often ends with strong consonant sounds, and it emphasizes practicing ending words like work, sport, and help cleanly without adding that extra little vowel at the end. Try to feel the word stopping firmly on that consonant.
So those are some of the common hurdles you might be facing. But the great news is that the podcast you shared is full of really practical techniques to help you make progress. Let's dive into some of those.
Shadowing is one of the first and most powerful methods it mentions.
Shadowing is indeed a game changer for pronunciation, I think. By listening to a native speaker, maybe from podcasts, audiobooks, or even movie clips, and trying to repeat exactly what they say at the same time, you're not just mimicking sounds, you're also absorbing the natural rhythm, the intonation, that's the way their voice goes up and down, and the smooth flow of their speech.
The advice to start with short sentences and at a slower pace, then gradually increasing the speed and complexity. That's key to making this work for you without feeling overwhelmed.
And it makes total sense to really train your ear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The more you expose yourself to different kinds of English accents, American, British, Australian, maybe even regional accents, the more tuned in you become to the subtle differences in sounds.
Absolutely. This kind of exposure makes you a more adaptable listener and, in turn, a more adaptable speaker. You start to pick up on those little variations that you might miss if you only ever listen to one type of English. It's like getting to know different musical instruments in an orchestra, you know.
Yeah, good point. Another technique that the podcast highlights, and this might feel a little nerve-wracking for some, is recording yourself speaking.
Oh, yeah. It can feel a bit strange, can't it? Hearing your own voice played back. But as the podcast rightly points out, it's an incredibly effective way to spot areas where you want to improve things you might not even realize you're doing. Comparing your recording to how a native speaker says the same thing gives you really concrete feedback, and it lets you see how you're progressing over time.
Then there's the really detailed advice about focusing on how you move your mouth and where you place your tongue. It's amazing how those small physical adjustments can make such a big difference in how a word sounds.
Yeah, this goes right back to those specific pronunciation challenges we were talking about earlier, like the or R and L. Really understanding how native speakers physically create those sounds, where their tongue is, how open their mouth is, can give you valuable clues. It helps you make targeted changes to your own speech. Using a mirror while you practice can also be surprisingly helpful just to see what your mouth is doing.
Right, visualizing it. Intonation and stress are also super important, aren't they? It's not just about getting the individual sounds right, but also about the musicality of your speech. Putting the stress on the wrong part of a word can even change its meaning, like the difference between record, to make an audio, and record, a written account.
Exactly, that's a perfect example.
Think of stress as the spotlight in a sentence. Putting it on the wrong word can shift the entire meaning or just sound unnatural, like saying I didn't eat the cake versus I didn't eat the cake.
Precisely. This is where the natural rhythm of English comes alive. Correct intonation, that rise and fall of your voice, and the right emphasis on syllables are vital. Vital for sounding natural and making sure your intended meaning comes across clearly. The podcast's example with record is a perfect illustration of just how crucial this is. Intonation, that's the rise and fall of your voice when you speak, like the melody of your speech.
And who would have thought that singing along to English songs could be such a great way to work on your accent? It sounds like a really fun way to practice pronunciation, rhythm, and even how words link together in speech, what's often called connected speech.
Music is such a fantastic and enjoyable tool for language learning. Seriously. It helps you soak up natural speech patterns and intonation almost without realizing it. And it makes the whole process much more memorable and motivating. Plus, who doesn't love a good sing-along? Connected speech is how words flow together naturally, often with slight changes in pronunciation at the boundaries between words. It's what makes speech sound smooth.
So those are some really powerful techniques to actively work on your accent. But what about making this a more effortless part of your everyday life? The podcast you shared has some great suggestions for building these habits into your routine. Talking to yourself in English is one, which I know might feel a little strange to some of you.
Huh. It might feel a bit odd at first, yeah. But it's actually a really low-pressure way to get comfortable forming sentences and practicing your pronunciation. No stress of a real conversation. Describing what you're doing, what you see around you, or even just planning out your day in English. These are all great ways to do this.
And if you're not quite ready to have full conversations with yourself out loud, another suggestion is to try thinking in English. Really try to form your sentences directly in English instead of first thinking in your native language and then translating.
Yeah, that's a really effective way to build your fluency. And it also helps you sidestep the potential for your native language's pronunciation habits to sneak in. It encourages a more direct connection between your thoughts and how you express them in English. Less filtering.
Reading out loud is another simple but powerful daily habit. Whether it's a book, a news article, or even a post on social media, really focus on clear pronunciation and the natural rhythm of the sentences as you read.
Definitely. This combines expanding your vocabulary with actively practicing your pronunciation. It's efficient. By regularly hearing your own voice speaking English, you become more aware of your own sound and can pinpoint areas where you'd like to improve.
Mimicking native speakers from videos, pausing after each sentence and trying to repeat it with the same intonation, the same speed, even the same emotion. That sounds like a really focused way to refine your speaking.
Mimicking is a very active and engaged form of learning. You're not just passively listening, you're actively trying to reproduce the sounds, the rhythm, and even the feeling behind the words. It's a really powerful technique for fine-tuning your pronunciation and intonation. It gets you closer to that natural flow.
And we can't forget the fun of tongue twisters. They might seem silly, but apparently they're fantastic for really drilling those tricky sounds and improving your overall fluency. She sells seashells by the seashore. Immediately comes to mind.
Oh yeah, the classics. Tongue twisters are brilliant for isolating specific sounds or combinations of sounds that you find particularly challenging, like R and ul, red lorry, yellow lorry. They really require precision and help to train the muscles in your mouth and tongue that you use for speaking.
Good one. The podcast also reminds us of the value of recording yourself regularly to track your progress over time, which, yeah, makes perfect sense.
Consistent feedback loop.
And of course, making an effort to have real conversations in English whenever you can, whether it's with friends, tutors, or even those AI voice assistants.
Real-world interaction is absolutely crucial. It's where the rubber meets the road, right? It gives you immediate feedback, even if it's just someone understanding you, and really build your confidence in using your spoken English. And you're right, AI voice assistants can be a surprisingly helpful and non-judgmental way to get some practice in. Hey Siri, how's my pronunciation? Kinda?
Huh. Exactly. It's so encouraging to see so many practical, everyday things you can do to work on your accent without feeling overwhelmed. Now let's move on to some more enjoyable and fun ways to train your English accent, because learning should definitely have its fun moments.
Absolutely. Keeping the learning process engaging and enjoyable is so important for staying motivated and making consistent progress. If it's not fun, you won't stick with it.
Totally. One suggestion is to try acting like an English speaker. Pick a scene from a movie or a TV show that you like and really try to step into that character, copying their tone of voice, their rhythm of speaking, and even the emotions they're expressing.
This is a fantastic way to really immerse yourself in the language and even the culture, actually. By focusing on the performance aspect, you can often let go of some of your inhibitions and experiment more freely with your pronunciation and intonation. It takes the pressure off just getting it right.
Another fun idea is to play around with different English accents. Maybe try your hand at a British accent, then an American one, then Australian, just for the fun of it. It sounds like a great way to get more comfortable with the variety of sounds in English.
Yeah, this kind of playful experimentation can actually really boost your overall pronunciation skills. It makes you more aware of the subtle differences within the English language, and it also helps you become more flexible and adaptable in your own speaking. You loosen up.
And of course, karaoke. Singing along to your favorite English songs is a classic for a reason. It's great for practicing pronunciation, getting a feel for the rhythm of the language, and even working on your breath control for longer sentences.
Karaoke takes the joy of music and combines it with active pronunciation practice. It's such a relaxed and enjoyable way to work on your accent and really build your confidence in speaking and singing in English. You're focused on the song, not just the sounds.
For those of you who are tech savvy, the podcast mentions using voice-based language learning apps that can give you instant feedback on your pronunciation. That sounds incredibly useful for identifying specific areas to work on.
Yeah, apps like Elsa Speak or Forvo, they use technology to give you immediate and targeted feedback on how you're saying specific sounds and words. They can be a really valuable tool to complement other practice methods and help you pinpoint exactly what you need to work on, like having a mini tutor in your pocket.
And who can resist a friendly tongue twister challenge with friends? A little bit of competition to see who can say those tricky sentences the fastest and clearest.
It's a lighthearted way to focus on pronunciation and have some laughs at the same time. That little bit of friendly competition can also give you an extra push to really nail those sounds. Makes practice less of a chore.
Finally, the podcast suggests simply talking to the voice assistants on your phone or smart speaker. If Siri, Alexa, or Google Assistant can understand what you're saying, it's a pretty good indicator that your pronunciation is becoming clearer. That's a clever way to get real-time feedback without any pressure, isn't it?
It really is. It's a practical and readily available tool for gauging how clear your speech is. If these systems can accurately understand your commands, it's a good sign that human listeners will also be able to understand you more easily. It's a decent benchmark.
So it's clear there are so many engaging ways you can work on your accent. Now, as we start to wrap things up, what are some of the key final pieces of advice and motivation from the podcast that you listen to?
Well, the overarching message is really one of patience and kindness toward yourself, and crucially, to enjoy the process. Remember that making progress takes time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Even small, consistent efforts every day will add up to significant improvements over time. And try not to compare yourself to others. Your accent is a part of what makes you unique. The real goal, as we've said, is to speak with clarity and confidence, not necessarily to sound exactly like someone who grew up speaking only English.
That's such an important point about your accent being a part of your identity. It really does show you have the incredible skill of speaking more than one language, and that's something to be really proud of. The main thing is to focus on making your English easy for others to understand. Communication first.
Exactly. And the podcast really emphasizes finding joy in the journey, using things like music, movies, and everyday conversations to make learning an enjoyable experience. When you're having fun with it, improvement often happens much more naturally. You're less likely to give up.
So the final encouragement is to keep practicing, stay consistent with those small daily habits, and really believe in your ability to keep improving. Your English will continue to get better the more you engage with it.
Absolutely. And this leads to a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. Think about how focusing on clear and effective communication, rather than striving for complete accent removal, how that can actually open up more opportunities for you and significantly boost your confidence in using English in all sorts of situations. So the question is, what small, enjoyable practice activity will you decide to incorporate into your daily routine starting today?